Hey everyone, it is Tuesday, December 1st. Hope you are doing well and that your week has gotten off to a good start. We are moving through the season of Advent by considering a series of devotionals in a book called Watch for the Light, readings for Advent and Christmas. And we have today a devotional from Henry Nouwen called Waiting for God. And as I've been through these devotionals in former years, this is one of the more powerful passages. So let's just jump right into it. I think this will be a good word for us today in our as we move into this, as we continue a little bit deeper into this season of Advent. So, Waiting for God from Henry Nouwen. Waiting is not a very popular attitude. Waiting is not something that people think about with great sympathy. In fact, most people consider waiting a waste of time. Perhaps that is because the culture in which we live in basically is saying, get going, do something, show you're able to make a difference, don't just sit there and wait. For many people, waiting is an awful desert between where they are and where they want to go. And people do not like such a place. They want to get out of it by doing something. In our particular historical situation, waiting is even more difficult because we are so fearful. One of the most pervasive emotions in the atmosphere around us is fear. People are afraid of feelings, afraid of other people, afraid of the future. Fearful people have a hard time waiting because when we're afraid, we want to get away from where we are. But if we cannot flee, we may fight instead. Many of our destructive acts come from the fear that something harmful will be done to us. And if we take a broader perspective, that not only individuals but whole communities and nations might be afraid of being harmed, we can understand how hard it is to wait and how tempting it is to act. Here are the roots of a first strike approach to others. People who live in a world of fear are more likely to make aggressive, hostile, destructive responses than people who are not so frightened. The more afraid we are, the harder waiting becomes. That's why waiting is such an unpopular attitude for many people. It impresses me, therefore, that all the figures who appear on the first pages of Luke's Gospel are waiting. Zechariah and Elizabeth, Mary, Simeon and Anna, all waiting. The whole opening scene of the Good News is filled with waiting people. And right at the beginning, all those people in some way or another hear the words, "Do not be afraid. I have something good to say to you." These words set the tone and the context. Now, Zechariah and Elizabeth, Mary, Simeon, and Anna are waiting for something new and good to happen. Who are these figures? Well, they are representatives of the waiting Israel. The Psalms are full of this attitude. My soul is waiting for the Lord. I count on his word. My soul is longing for the Lord more than a watchman for daybreak. Let the watchman count on daybreak, and Israel on the Lord. Because with the Lord there is mercy and fullness of redemption. That's Psalm 130. My soul is waiting for the Lord. That is the song that reverberates all through the Hebrew Scriptures, the Old Testament. But not all who dwell in Israel are waiting. In fact, we might say that the prophets criticized the people, at least in part, for giving up their attentiveness to what was coming. Waiting finally became the attitude of the remnant of Israel, of that small group of Israelites that remained faithful. The prophet Zephaniah says, "In your midst I will leave a humble and lowly people, and those who are left in Israel will seek refuge in the name of Yahweh. They will do no wrong, will tell no lies, and their perjured tongue will no longer be found in their mouths." It is that purified remnant of faithful people who are waiting. Elizabeth, Zechariah, Mary, and Simeon are representatives of that remnant. They have been able to wait, to be attentive, to live expectantly. But what is the nature of waiting? What is the practice of waiting? How are they waiting? And how are we called to wait with them? Waiting, as we see it in the people of the first pages of the Gospel, is waiting with a sense of promise. Zechariah, your wife Elizabeth is to bear you a son. Mary, listen, you are to conceive and bear a son. People who wait have received a promise that allows them to wait. They have received something that is at work in them, like a seed that has started to grow. This is very important. We can only really wait if what we're waiting for has already begun in us. So waiting is never a movement from nothing to something. It's always a movement of something. It's always a movement from something to something more. Zechariah, Mary, and Elizabeth were living with a promise that nurtured them, that fed them, and that made them able to stay where they were. And in this way, the promise itself could grow in them and for them. Second, waiting is active. Most of us think of waiting as something very passive, a hopeless state determined by events totally out of our hands. The bus is late, you cannot do anything about it, so you just have to sit there and wait. It's not difficult to understand the irritation people feel when somebody says, "just wait." Words like that seem to push us into passivity. But there's none of that passivity in the scriptures. Those who are waiting very actively. They know what they are waiting for. It's growing from the ground on which they're standing. That's the secret. The secret of waiting is the faith that the seed has been planted and something has begun. Active waiting means to be present fully to the moment, in the conviction that something is happening where you are and that you want to be present to it. A waiting person is someone who is present to the moment, who believes that the moment is the moment. A waiting person is a patient person. The word patience means the willingness to stay where we are and live out of that situation to the full, to live the situation out to the full in the belief that something hidden will make manifest itself to us. Impatient people are always expecting the real thing to happen somewhere else and therefore want to go elsewhere. The moment is empty, but patient people dare to stay where they are. Patient living means to live actively in the present and wait there. Waiting then is not passive. It involves nurturing the moment, as a mother nurtures the child that's growing in her. Zechariah, Elizabeth, and Mary were very present to the moment. That's why they could hear the angel. They were alert, attentive to the voice that spoke to them and said, "Do not be afraid, something's happening. Pay attention." But there's more. Waiting is open-ended. Open-ended waiting is hard for us because we tend to wait for something very concrete, for something that we wish to have. Much of our waiting is filled with wishes. I wish I had that job. I wish the weather would be better. I wish that the pain would go. We're full of wishes, and our waiting easily gets entangled in those wishes. For this reason, a lot of our waiting is not open-ended. Instead, our waiting is a way of controlling the future. We want the future to go in a very specific direction, and if this does not happen, we're disappointed, can even slip into despair. That is why we have such a hard time waiting. We want to do the things that will make the desired events take place. Here we can see how wishes tend to be connected with fears. But Zechariah, Elizabeth, and Mary were not filled with wishes. They were filled with hope. Hope is something very different. Hope is trusting that something will be fulfilled, but fulfilled according to the promises and not just according to our wishes. Therefore, hope is always open-ended. I found it very important in my own life to let go of my wishes and start hoping. It was only when I was willing to let go of wishes that something really new, something beyond my own expectations could happen to me. Just imagine what Mary was actually saying in the words, "I am the handmaid of the Lord, let what you have said be done in me." She was saying, I don't know what this all means, but I trust that good things will happen. She trusted so deeply that her waiting was open to all possibilities, and she did not want to control them. She believed that when she listened carefully, she could trust what was going to happen. To wait open-endedly is enormously radical attitude toward life. So is to trust that something will happen to us far beyond our own imaginings. So too is giving up control over our future and letting God define our life. Trusting that God molds us according to God's love and not according to our fear. The spiritual life is a life in which we wait, actively present to the moment, trusting that new things will happen to us, new things that are far beyond our own imagination, fantasy, or prediction. That, indeed, is a very radical stance toward life in a world preoccupied with control. Now, let me say something about the practice of waiting. How do we wait? Well, one of the most beautiful passages in Scripture is Luke 1:39 through 56, which suggests that we wait together, as Mary and Elizabeth did. What happened when Mary received the words of promise? She went to Elizabeth. Something was happening to Elizabeth as well as to Mary, but how could they live that out? I find the meeting of these two women very moving because Elizabeth and Mary came together and enabled each other to wait. Mary's visit made Elizabeth aware of what she was waiting for. The child leapt for joy in her. Mary affirmed Elizabeth's waiting. And then Elizabeth said to Mary, "Blessed is she who believed that the promise made her by the Lord would be fulfilled." And Mary responded, "My soul proclaims the greatness of the Lord." She burst into joy herself. These two women created space for each other to wait. They affirmed for each other that something was happening that was worth waiting for. I think that is the model of the Christian community. It's a community of support, celebration, and affirmation in which we can lift up what has already begun in us. The visit of Elizabeth and Mary is one of the Bible's most beautiful expressions of what it means to form community, to be together, gathered around a promise, affirming that something is really happening. This is what prayer is all about. It's coming together around the promise. That is what celebration is all about. It's about lifting up what's already there. This is what the Eucharist is about. It is saying thank you for the seed that has been planted. It's saying we are waiting for the Lord who has already come. I hope you found this passage from Henry Nouwen meaningful. Join us again tomorrow, and we will look at another passage for the season of Advent. God bless you today. I hope your day goes well. Take care, and we will see you soon.